All right, so we're gonna set up our scene in Maya to render our rocket. The textures are pretty much done. There's still a few things you still have to add here and there, but even if I haven't finished my textures, I can start doing this process to kind of test out how they're looking outside of Substance. Because right now, Substance has a pretty unique light setup that I could modify, but I want to see how they would look like in my final software that I will be rendering them. In this case, it's going to be Maya. So to start testing it out, even if I haven't finished, I can start exporting my textures, and every time I work in Substance, I can re-export them, and they should update live every time I want to keep working on it, right, and test them out. So to export, we can go to File, Export Selection, or Export Textures, and this is a shortcut, just Control-Shift-E, right, Control-Shift-E, and this opens up this little dialog box to export our textures. Very important, we have to set up our output directory, which is just where we're going to be exporting our images to. So we can just open up this file. I should have a project set up here. Got my desktop. Here it is, right? And I already have my folder set up to where I want to export them. I select that folder, and then I'm just going to change my format, my output template, sorry, to a format that I can easily apply, in this case Maya. So Substance already comes with a few presets in which we can export our textures, the format we can export them. And the one we're going to be using is going to be the Arnold AI standard format. Right? This is already going to export the things we need to later import them into Maya directly. We can check our export list and see the images we're going to be exporting from Substance right here. And that should be about it, right? We only care about changing where we're going to save and how we're going to save it. The file of type we can just leave as based on output template. That's all already taken care of. And we just hit export, and that spits out our images into our folder. And if we want to check, we can click on Open Output Directory. And these are the images that Substance created for us, right? We have our color, we have our height. Right? These are the different maps that later we're going to be applying directly into our model. I'm going to jump over to Maya. All right? Here we have our model. We assigned a material before we got started, but we're going to be making one from scratch because this material right now is a Lambert. And to properly render our images, it's better to use a shader or a material that already comes packaged with our render engine. In this case, we're going to be using Arnold, and Arnold uses an AI standard material. And this just makes setup a lot easier. Now, instead of doing it manually, I'm going to be teaching you guys how to use a specific plugin that comes shipped from Maya. If you look over here, I have this plugin already enabled, but if you don't see the Substance plugin over here, you have to turn it on by going into Windows, Settings and Preferences, Plugin Manager, and then just type out Substance, right? And then just make sure you check all these boxes, right? You can hit Apply to All, Load it, Auto Load, and then close that. And then we click on Substance. I'm going to do an Applied Workflow to Maps. Now, this process you would have to do if you have more than one material. You would have to do it for every material you have. If you follow it along, you should only have one material for the entire piece. So I'm going to click here, right? By default, it's already set to Arnold, but here you see we have other render engines. These don't come shipped with Maya. You would have to either buy them or download them and install them. But Arnold comes packaged already with Maya, so we can just leave that as is. We're going to select multiple maps, and we're going to find our textures. And this is why naming things is so important, because found them really quick. I'm going to select all of them, hit select, and then Maya will automatically, for the most part, I'm noticing one did not connect properly, which is my metalness, but my base color connected, my normal connected, my roughness. If you have one that didn't, you can just individually select it. And what's happening here is that the names aren't identical, right? Maya names them metallic. Substance exported it as metalness, which is essentially the same thing. and we apply that, now we have to actually apply that material to our object. So I'm going to hit right click, assign existing material because we just created that material. AI standard surface 1. Right. And you might not notice any changes right now, but the material is applied. And I'm just going to name it so I'm not lost. This is going to be my rocket. I can't name it MTL again because I already have that MTL. So I'm just going to, just to distinguish it, I'm just going to name this MAT from that. And if I want to see the material preview, I can press 6 on the keyboard. And here I have an unlit view of my material. Right now there's no light source. It just looks completely flat. Now comes the second part of this video where I'm just going to add a plane and I'm going to make a little stage so that I can set up like if it were an actual photography studio so I can render my image out. I'm going to click on this here plane. I'm going to scale that up. I'm going to go ahead and enter in its properties. I don't want any subdivisions. So I just want to basically scale this up and make like a tarp. This is going to help us reflect some nice shadows and boss lights off of my model. I select this edge right here, Control B to bevel, and I'm going to add a handful of segments here. And we essentially created our own little stage, our own little studio to render out our image. Right? Nice and cute. And to actually light our scene, we're going to be using a 3-point light setup. All right, as the name implies, we are only going to be using 3 lights. We could use more, but with these 3 key lights, I shouldn't name them key lights because one of them is called like a key light. But with these 3 lights, you can pretty much render anything. Give that a nice look. So as you can see, this is my area light. Right, I went to Arnold Lights Area Light. And I'm just going to physically scale this up. This is going to affect how the light is rendered in Maya. But I'm just going to start with this. I kind of want to make sure this is set to object. There we go, not component. Right. So right now I might not see a render happening because the light source is pretty weak. I just hit Arnold and then render. Right now not much is happening. I'm just gonna go in here and crank up the exposure. What I like to do is kind of overdo the exposure, so I'm gonna do something like 20, something ridiculous. Hit play. There we go. See how overexposed it is? Now I can go in here and start tweaking it down. Right, playing around with the exposure and intensity. Essentially, intensity and exposure. Exposure is a multiplier. It's a by 2 multiplier of the intensity of the light. So these two are pretty much working off each other to get the effect. Whichever one you want to work with is how you're going to get the effect. Obviously, I don't want to overdo it. I'm just going to place that like that. And notice how I'm pausing and playing. In my case, I don't want to overexert my computer. So I'm just kind of testing out how this would look. It's way too much. Crank up that intensity. Let's the exposure to like 10. And start playing with something like that. Right. Now I can go in here and start duplicating this light. Right now this would be my key light. This would be my main or most important light. I'm going to duplicate this one and just move it around. Rotate it into position. And this is going to be my fill light. So the fill light, as the name implies, it helps fill out shadows. Depending on the position of my lights, that's how I would arrange them individually. And obviously, you can kind of notice I'm having an issue where I'm kind of moving, having to adjust the camera every time I want to test it out. So to avoid that, I'm just going to make a custom camera so I don't have to switch every time. I'm going to close this, go into panels, perspective, and make a new perspective camera. and this is going to be my render cam. Right, I'm just going to turn on my resolution gate. I need to tweak out my resolution, so I'm going to do this from the get-go. Just go into render settings, and I kind of want to render this at a 1x1 cube. So I'm just going to go into my image size, my presets, change this into a 1K square. Right, and the gate automatically updates. Now I can better position this camera. There we go. And I'm going to lock the camera so that it doesn't move. Right, clicking this little lock icon right here. Now I can go back to my main perspective camera, and I'm going to make sure I name this. Just render cam. There we go. Head on over to Arnold, and now I can swap from perspective to my render cam. There we go. Now I can keep working here, right, and see the final result, or final-ish result of all my work. The last light I'm missing, or my last essential light for my 3-point light setup, is a rim light or a backlight, just to give that a nice contrast with the background. We can change the background color and things like that later on. Not super important for now. Usually the rim light you would position somewhere behind your model at an angle, so that you can get this effect right here. My model's looking a little low poly, so I'm going to give it a smooth preview by selecting it and pressing 3. I got that smooth look right there. And it's just a matter of playing with my lights. So more or less get a nice lighting setup. Obviously, you would use more reference and things like that to, better, get a better result. But this would be the essential setup. And just to give you guys what you would do after you would finish setting up your lights, you can go into, you wait for the image to render to 100%. I'm not going to wait it out. I'm just going to pause. Go to File, Save Image. And I can export a preview of my image. We have a few renders that I've been doing. I'm just going to throw them into my class folder. I'll make a new folder for it. Here's images. This would be a test render. And that should be the basic setup for this process.